Hey guys, tonight, you're not waking up in your cozy bed. No soft mattress, no hum of the air conditioner, no lazy scroll on your phone to check what time it is. Instead, you open your eyes to a square of blinding sunlight cutting straight through the reed mat hanging in the doorway of your mud brick home. And congratulations, you've somehow landed in ancient Mesopotamia. The year, somewhere around 1750 BCE. The place, the bustling, dusty sprawl between two enormous rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates. The cradle of civilization, they call it. But tonight, or rather, this morning, you're about to find out why the cradle rocks a little too hard for you to survive even one full day. Your bed, if you can call it that, is a thin mat woven from reeds. It's laid directly on the hard-packed dirt floor, which is cool before sunrise, but will soon become an oven. Your pillow, also reeds, maybe stuffed with straw if you're lucky enough to be middle class, which you are not. You slept in your day clothes because, well, there's no such thing as pajamas. And honestly, stripping down would just make it easier for the scorpions to get creative during the night. You blink and try to orient yourself. The air is already thick and dry, with that faint metallic temps that comes from living downwind of the blacksmith's corner of the marketplace. Your mouth is so parched it feels like you've been chewing pottery shards, which, technically, isn't far from the truth. Last night's dinner was barley bread hard enough to chip a tooth. Outside, the sound of bleating goats and the hollow clunk of wooden water buckets hitting the sides of clay jars means the neighborhood is already awake. You can hear the low rhythmic chanting of a man calling on Enlil, the god of wind, which is ironic, because there's not a single breeze stirring. It's just still. Heat will come soon, and it will stay, like an unwanted relative who ignores hints and never leaves. You sit up slowly, because the rush of standing too fast in this climate can make you black out before you even start the day. Your joints ache in ways you didn't know joints could ache. You're in your 20s, but that's basically middle-aged here. Life expectancy hovers somewhere around 35, give or take a war, a flood, or a particularly unfriendly neighbor. Historians still argue whether people aged faster from the sun and labor, or if our concept of old is just very spoiled. Either way, you're not here for the long haul. The first thing you notice, besides the heat already gathering in the corners, is the smell. Mesopotamia in the early morning smells like a complicated stew you didn't ask to be served. There's a bass note of sun-baked mud, layered with animal dung, sweat, and the ever-present temps of river water that's been sitting just a bit too long in open jars. And there's no scented candle called Ancient Babylon Breeze to help you out here. You stretch and immediately regret it as dust shakes down from the ceiling. A few flecks land in your hair. That ceiling, by the way, is a flat roof made of palm logs, reeds, and mud plaster, which means if there's been rain recently, it's soggy enough to sag. If there hasn't been rain, it's brittle enough to crack. Either way, you're one good sneeze away from redecorating your entire home with rubble. The house itself is simple. One main room, maybe a small storage space for grain, and a flat roof that doubles as a sleeping area on cooler nights. Privacy, non-existent. You share your space with your entire family, parents, siblings, maybe a cousin who's just passing through for the last 6 months, plus a few chickens who have claimed one corner as their own. The idea of me time is about as real as the idea of air conditioning. As you stand, your bare feet meet the dirt floor. It's gritty, uneven, and warmer than you expected. Heat doesn't just disappear here overnight. Outside you can hear the slap of sandals on stone as your neighbors head for the river to collect water. You're about to join them, because without it, you can't cook, clean, or survive for long. But there's a catch. The river is also full of things that want to kill you. Parasites, snakes, the occasional crocodile. Yes, crocodiles. They don't show up in the tourist brochures, but they're here. You step outside, into the narrow alley between houses. The sunlight is already harsh, bouncing off pale mud walls that seem to glow. Dust hangs in the air, stirred by every passing cart and goat. The street is barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side, and there's no drainage system to speak of. Any wastewater just seeps into the packed dirt or evaporates into your lungs. From here, you can see the silhouette of the ziggurat in the distance, a massive stepped temple rising above the low skyline. It's beautiful in a way, almost shimmering in the morning haze, but also a constant reminder. The gods are always watching, and you owe them daily respect, and possibly a goat. You can't help but wonder if the gods also notice the smell of the streets, but you keep that thought to yourself. You pass a neighbor who's already at work, grinding grain with a heavy stone. Her hands are calloused, her back bent, and she gives you a nod that says, "Yes, this is my life, and it will be yours too." A dog lies in the shade, watching with the kind of suspicion only animals in hot climates can muster, like they know you might try to take their spot. The sun climbs higher, and you can feel your skin starting to tighten from the heat. There's no sunscreen here, no floppy beach hat, no gentle reminder from a dermatologist to reapply every 2 hours. The only protection is staying in the shade, but shade is a limited commodity, and everyone wants it. By the time you reach the main road to the river, you're sweating through your linen tunic. Linen is the only fabric light enough to keep you from cooking in your own skin, but it also soaks up sweat like it's auditioning for a new job as a sponge. And laundry? That's a whole other ordeal you'll deal with later, if you last. That long dot in the distance, you hear a merchant shouting about fresh dates. Another is offering copper tools straight from the smithy, which probably means they were hammered together 10 minutes ago. A boy runs past with a clay jug, spilling half the water in it. He doesn't stop to apologize. No one does here. Everyone's too busy surviving. You can already tell. This is not going to be your kind of vacation. This is going to be a fight against the heat, the hunger, the water, the animals, the laws, and maybe even the gods themselves. And you haven't even had breakfast yet. Alright, you've survived the first few minutes of the morning without collapsing from heat or tripping over a goat. Now it's time to get ready for the day, and by get ready, I mean go through the ancient Mesopotamian version of a morning hygiene routine. Spoiler, it's not exactly a TikTok skincare haul. First stop, water. You grab a clay jug. It's heavy, chipped, and suspiciously smells like the last thing it held, which might have been beer, or fish, or possibly both. You step outside toward the communal water jar that your neighbors filled from the river earlier. This is your main source for washing your face, brushing your teeth, and probably drinking later. The water is murky, with little specks floating in it. You tell yourself they're just bits of nature, which technically isn't a lie, just not the whole truth. You splash some on your face, and it's shockingly warm. There's no cold tap here. River water sits in the sun until it reaches tepid soup temperature. You rub your face with your hands, no towel, just air dry and hope for the best. The dust you slept in last night is now mud-streaked across your cheeks. Congratulations, you've invented the Mesopotamian face mask. Tooth care. Oh yes, they had it. In their own way. You don't have a toothbrush. Instead, you chew on a small stick from a certain plant until the fibers splay out like a tiny broom. Then you scrub your teeth with it. Toothpaste. More like tooth dirt. Sometimes people mix ash or powdered charcoal with water to make a gritty paste that, sure, scrapes away food bits, and maybe also your enamel. The taste is like licking a campfire. You're starting to miss fluoride. If you're feeling extra fancy, you might rub some sesame oil on your skin. It's moisturizer, bug repellent, and perfume all in one. Although perfume is a stretch, since you'll smell like a salad about to be grilled. Still, in a world where everyone smells like sweat, smoke, and livestock, sesame oil is practically Chanel no. 5. Hair care is similarly rustic. Shampoo. Nope. You wash your hair in the river with the same ashand oil mixture you use for clothes and dishes. It leaves your hair cleanish, but with the texture of old rope. Hairstyles are simple braids, buns, or just letting it hang loose. If you're wealthy, you might have a bronze comb. If not, you just use your fingers and call it natural. Now comes the wardrobe. You're already wearing a linen tunic from yesterday because, frankly, changing clothes every day isn't a thing. Laundry is too much work, and clothes are too valuable. Linen is breathable, but by breathable we mean lets all the dust straight through to your skin. Shoes are leather sandals, thin enough to feel every rock on the road. You tie them with straps that somehow manage to both dig into your ankles and come untied every 20 steps. For scent control. The Mesopotamians actually did have perfumes, usually made from crushed flowers, resins, and oils. But for you, the everyday option is just a dab of sesame or date oil, maybe mixed with a little myrrh, if you can afford it. And while it doesn't mask the smell of sweat, it does at least make you smell like fancy sweat by the time you're ready. You're not exactly clean, more like reset to factory settings. You're still dusty, still smell faintly of goat, but now your hair isn't tangled, your teeth feel like you did something for them, and your skin is shiny enough to reflect a little sunlight. Good enough. You grab your jug, step out into the blinding light, and join the flow of people heading to the marketplace, temple, or fields. Everyone looks about the same level of clean as you. And that's the thing about Mesopotamian hygiene. The bar is low, but it's low for everyone. You're not competing with anyone's Instagram perfect morning routine here. You're competing with the sun, the dust, and the fact that the river you just washed in is also the city's sewer. And in this competition, you're already winning. Simply because you're still alive. So, here you are, standing outside your very own home in ancient Mesopotamia. Very own is a bit generous. This is less HGTV Dreamhouse and more built it with whatever we could grab before the sun boiled us alive. Forget your boards. Forget granite countertops. Forget even the idea of a front door that locks. Here, your home is a squat, rectangular structure of sun-dried mud bricks, stacked with the same ambition as a child's Lego tower, except here, if it collapses, someone gets crushed. The walls are thick, about 2 feet deep, because that's the only insulation you get. No fiberglass, no central air, just compacted clay, mixed with straw, pressed into molds, dried in the sun for days, then slapped together, with more mud as mortar. If it rains too much, the bricks melt back into mud. If it rains too little, they crack like overcooked bread. Either way, repairs are constant, because the climate isn't exactly homeowner friendly. The color scheme, let's call it 50 shades of beige. Beige walls, beige floor, beige ceiling, beige dust. If you want to redecorate, your only option is to hang a reed mat or smear on a fresh coat of slightly different beige mud. And don't even think about hanging heavy shelves. The walls will crumble under the weight. The good news, you'll never have to argue with anyone about accent colors. The bad news, you might forget what colors are. Your front entrance isn't a grand doorway. It's more of a shoulder-width gap closed off by a reed mat, maybe reinforced with a thin wooden frame if you fancy. This mat keeps out exactly 0 dust, all flies, and most goats. Privacy is a myth here. You will hear everything your neighbors say, and they will hear everything you say. If you want to gossip, you either whisper or do it in the market where the background noise hides you. Of course, if you say something juicy, it'll still make its way back to the person in record time. Think of Mesopotamia as one giant open-plan office, except with more livestock. Inside, the floor is packed dirt hard enough to stand on, soft enough to scuff into dust clouds every time you shuffle your feet. You'll spend a surprising amount of your life sweeping this floor with a bundle of palm fronds, fully aware you're fighting a losing battle against the desert itself. Shoes, optional. Splinters from the reed mats. Guaranteed the roof is flat, supported by palm logs laid across the width of the house, covered with reeds, then sealed with yet more mud. It's strong enough to walk on, and in cooler months, people sleep up there under the stars. Romantic, yes, until the sand flies find you. Or it rains, and you wake up soaked, because there's no pitch to drain the water. It just pools, seeps, and eventually drips straight onto your face at 3 in the morning. Now, let's talk interior design. The main room is your kitchen, living room, and bedroom all in one. Storage is a few clay jars in the corner for grain, oil, or beer, and by beer I mean a thick, porridge-like brew you drink through a straw because floating bits are part of the experience. The only furniture. Maybe a low table for food prep, and a couple of reed stools that collapse if you lean too far. Beds, mats on the floor, chairs with backs. Not a thing yet. Lighting at night comes from oil lamps, small clay bowls filled with sesame oil, with a fiber wick. The light is dim and flickers like it's auditioning for a horror movie. The smell is distinct. Imagine burning salad dressing. And these lamps don't just attract moths. They attract every insect within a 50-foot radius. Nothing says goodnight like a beetle buzzing past your ear in the dark. One side of the house might have a small oven, basically a clay dome over a fire pit. It's great for baking flatbread and heating the house in winter, but in summer, it turns the place into a sauna. You will sweat just looking at it. Ventilation is provided by an open doorway. That's it. If there's no wind, you'll just marinate in your own humidity. And yes, there's the question you're thinking, but afraid to ask. The bathroom? There isn't one. If you're lucky enough to live near a drainage ditch, you might have a designated spot outside. Otherwise, nature is your bathroom. The river is also your bathtub, dishwashing station, and laundry room. That's right, the same water source for drinking, cooking, and everything else. You're starting to see why people didn't last long here. Speaking of laundry, washing clothes is basically beating them in the river until they give up whatever dirt they've collected. Soap is a mix of ash and animal fat, which smells like, well, ash and animal fat. Clothes never smell fresh, they just smell different. But here's the thing, for all its dust, sweat, and questionable hygiene, your mud brick home works. It keeps you relatively cool in the day, warm at night, and offers shelter from the occasional sandstorm. It's built from materials you can find within walking distance, and repairs are a matter of slapping on more mud. In 4,000 years, archaeologists will still be finding pieces of homes like this, marveling that they survived long after you didn't. You lean against a doorway now. Looking out at the street, a goat wanders past. 2 kids chase each other. With sticks, a merchant's cart squeaks over the uneven ground. The smell of baking bread wafts from a neighbor's oven. And for a moment, you think, maybe this isn't so bad. Then a scorpion crawls out from a crack in your wall, and you remember. You have 19 more hours to survive. Forget your avocado toast, your oat milk latte, and your Instagrammable smoothie bowl. Breakfast in ancient Mesopotamia is, well, let's call it minimalist. And by minimalist, I mean you're going to eat whatever's left over from last night, even if it's a little stale, because food doesn't grow on trees unless you live near a date palm, in which case, yes, it literally does. Your first challenge, fire. There's no turning on the stove. If the household fire went out overnight, congratulations, you're spending the next 30 minutes coaxing a spark from flint and tinder, or begging a neighbor for a coal from their hearth. This is less culinary arts and more basic survival. If you're lucky, the oven still has some warmth from yesterday's baking, and you can slide in a flatbread for a quick reheat. Breakfast staples are pretty simple. Bread, beer, dates, maybe onions. The bread is flat, dense, and baked from barley flour. Wheat is a luxury. It's chewy enough to build jaw muscles and bland enough to make you appreciate salt like it's gold. You might dip it in sesame oil, which adds flavor and calories. Butter, cheese, rare treats, unless you're wealthy or have a cousin who owes you. And yes, beer is on the breakfast menu. Not because everyone is looking to start their day tipsy, but because water can be, well, let's just say it's not winning any awards for purity. Beer, even the thick, porridge-like kind Mesopotamians drank, is safer. It's brewed from barley, slightly fermented, and often flavored with dates or herbs. You drink it through a long straw to avoid swallowing the solids floating on top. Think of it as an ancient protein shake, just one that's also bred in liquid form. Fruit, if you have it, means dates or figs. They're sweet, they keep for ages, and they double as portable snacks for later in the day. If you're near the river, you might have fresh fish, but that's not exactly grab-and-go breakfast food. Plus, without refrigeration, fish has a short window between delicious and questionable. On special mornings, you might have eggs, chicken, duck, or goose. These are boiled or fried in clay pans, and if you add onions and herbs, congratulations. You've made the Mesopotamian omelet. Don't get too excited though. Spices beyond local herbs are expensive, and salt, while available, isn't always used liberally. People here are more worried about food lasting than food tasting amazing. If you're poor, breakfast might just be leftover stew from the night before. This is usually a thick mix of barley, lentils, and whatever vegetables or occasional meat scraps were on hand. Meat is rare for commoners. Most animals are too valuable alive for their milk, wool, or labor. When you do get meat, it's often goat or sheep, cooked until it's more about texture than tenderness. Eating utensils, optional. Bread doubles as your spoon, scoop, and plate. Hands do the rest. If it's messy, you wipe them on your tunic, because linen absorbs oil just as well as any napkin. And anyway, your tunic was never really clean to begin with. Now, here's the thing about Mesopotamian breakfast. It's not about pleasure. It's about fuel. You eat enough to get you through hours in the fields, the market, or the workshop. There's no lingering over coffee and pastries. There's no scrolling through your phone while nibbling fruit. You eat, you go, you work. If you're wealthy, maybe you get a second, fancier breakfast later. If you're not, you probably won't eat again until the afternoon. But, and here's the twist, for all its simplicity, breakfast here does its job. The bread fills you, the beer hydrates you, sort of, the dates give you a sugar hit, and the onions, well, they make sure nobody bothers standing too close to you. So you finish your bread, wipe your hands, grab your tools or goods, and step out into the busy street. The city is already alive, merchants shouting prices, donkeys braying, and somewhere, the smell of fresh bread baking that reminds you you'll be hungry again in about 6 hours. And just like that, you're fueled up for another day in the land between the rivers. The sun's barely climbed above the mud brick rooftops, and the city is already humming. This isn't the lazy, quiet kind of hum you hear in a modern morning cafe. No, this is the low, constant roar of a living organism that's made of people, animals, dust, and the occasional shout of someone trying to find their runaway goat. You step out of your house and into the narrow lane, if you can even call it a lane. It's more like a winding trench between tall mud brick walls. The bricks are sun-dried crumbly at the edges, and in some places patched with straw and bits of broken pottery. Each wall leans slightly inward, casting enough shade to keep you from instantly overheating. The air smells like a combination of bread baking, animal dung, and, is that fish? Yes, definitely, fish. The ground is hard-packed dirt, uneven, with ruts from cartwheels and hoofprints from yesterday's market. Traffic, here and there, puddles glisten in the morning sun, and you tell yourself it's water, but deep down, you know better. People here don't have indoor plumbing. They have dump it out the door and hope it runs downhill. You instinctively step around the puddles, though the locals hardly notice. As you walk, you start to notice the soundscape. Voices overlap in a mix of Sumerian, Akkadian, and trader dialects from far-off lands. There's the creak of wooden cartwheels, the sharp clop-clop of donkeys' hooves, and the rustling of woven reed baskets swinging from people's arms. Somewhere, a baby is crying, a dog is barking, and a vendor is already arguing with his first customer of the day about the price of barley. You pass your first doorway open, no real door to speak of, just a cloth hanging over the entrance. Inside, you see a small workshop, a potter at his wheel, spinning a lump of clay with one hand while steadying it with the other. The air is cool and damp inside, the floor littered with broken shards. He doesn't look up. He's too focused on shaping something worth selling before the clay dries out further along. You encounter your first crowd, a cluster of people around a baker's stall. The oven is a domed clay structure, open at the top, with flatbreads stuck to the inner walls. The baker uses a long reed paddle to peel the bread off and toss it into a basket. The smell is incredible, warm, nutty, slightly smoky. You're tempted to stop, but the crowd is intense. People here don't queue politely. They press in, call out orders, wave coins in the air, and shove bread under their tunics before anyone else grabs it. You keep moving. The lane opens into a wider street, still dirt, but packed with life. Stalls line both sides, each just a mat or wooden frame holding goods. Here's a man selling woven reed mats. There's a woman with jars of sesame oil and little clay pots of honey. A boy trots past with a basket of figs on his head, shouting their price to anyone who'll listen. Then you reach the fish seller. Oh, you know you've reached the fish seller. The smell hits before the stall comes into view, sharp, salty, and slightly sour. The fish lie on woven mats, glistening in the sun, their eyes already clouding. Flies hover over them like tiny storm clouds. The vendor sits cross-legged, lazily waving a palm frond to keep the insects at bay, or maybe just to look like he's trying. Across the street, a spice trader has a much more pleasant stall. His goods are rare and expensive: cinnamon, cardamom, and cumin for the wealthy. Cheaper local herbs for everyone else. He has small piles of brightly colored powders, each one looking like it belongs in an art shop more than a kitchen. You lean in to smell, and for a moment, the fish stall fades from memory. You turn down another street and nearly collide with a herd of goats. They're being driven toward the market square, bleating and kicking up dust. The herder, a wiry man with sun-leathered skin, shouts at them in a voice that could probably cut stone. The goats ignore him entirely. One of them stops to nibble at a hanging reed basket, and the herder swats it on the rump without breaking stride. Eventually, you reach the market square, the heart of the city. It's a wide open area surrounded by more permanent stalls and small shops. The ground is even dustier here, churned up by hundreds of feet. The noise is overwhelming. Vendors calling out prices, buyers haggling, livestock bleating, and somewhere in the distance, the steady clang of a blacksmith's hammer on bronze. The blacksmith's corner is mesmerizing. The shop is little more than an open shed with a stone anvil, a clay furnace, and a pile of scrap metal. Sparks fly as he hammers a red-hot piece into shape. Nearby, his apprentice pumps the bellows, sweat dripping down his back despite the early hour. Tools, knives, and jewelry are laid out on a wooden table, their surfaces catching the sunlight. But it's not all commerce. The market is also a social hub. You see people leaning on stalls, gossiping about temple politics, grain prices, or who was seen with whom at the last festival. Children dart between adults, chasing each other or trying to snag free samples from distracted vendors. A group of older men sit on a reed mat in the shade, playing a board game with carved stones. Every so often, one slaps the mat and laughs, while the others groan and accuse him of cheating. On the far side of the square, you find the temple district. The ziggurat rises above the city, its massive steps leading up to the shrine at the top. The walls are decorated with brightly painted tiles, though many have faded under the relentless sun. Priests in long robes move between the temple and the market, collecting offerings, sometimes in grain, sometimes in oil, sometimes in coins. The temple itself is more than just a place of worship. It's also a bank, a storehouse, and a power center. Inside, scribes sit at low tables, carefully pressing cuneiform onto clay tablets. They record everything: debts, trades, marriages, even legal disputes. The smell of clay and reed pens mixes with the faint scent of incense drifting down from the shrine above. As you wander, you start to notice the class divide. Wealthy citizens wear cleaner linen, dyed in rare colors, like deep blue or red, and their sandals are made from finer leather. Slaves or laborers wear rougher tunics, sometimes nothing more than a wrapped cloth. The wealthy move with a certain ease, knowing they can buy whatever they need. The poor scan stalls for scraps, or stand in the shade hoping for day labor. By midday, the city is at its peak activity. The streets are hotter, the air thicker with dust, and the smells more intense. You pass a stall selling cooked lamb skewers, sizzling over an open flame. The scent is intoxicating. Nearby, a brewer pours beer into clay cups for workers taking a break. A group of women carry large jars of water from the river, balancing them on their heads with practiced grace. Then you turn a corner and stumble upon something unexpected: a storyteller. He stands on a low wooden crate, gesturing wildly as he recounts a tale of ancient kings, epic floods, and gods who meddle in human affairs. A crowd gathers, laughing and gasping at all the right moments. The man's voice carries over the market noise, his words painting pictures as vivid as any tablet. You realize that, in a world without books or screens, this is prime entertainment. As the sun begins to dip, shadows stretch across the streets. Merchants pack up, tying bundles of goods with rope. The goats that came in this morning are gone, sold, traded, or led back out to pasture. The smell of evening cooking starts to drift from doorways. Lentil stew, baking bread, maybe a hint of roasted meat if someone's celebrating. You head back through the quieter lanes, past children playing in the dust and neighbors chatting on doorsteps. The city feels different now, calmer, softer. But the day's energy still lingers in the air, like the echo of a drumbeat. And as you step inside your home, shaking the dust from your sandals, you realize something. You didn't just walk through a city. You walked through a living, breathing story, one made of clay and sweat, of trade and prayer, of bread and beer and the stubborn, unshakable will to keep building life in the land between the rivers. If breakfast in Mesopotamia is all about fuel, then work is all about endurance. It doesn't matter who you are, rich, poor, free, enslaved, there's a role waiting for you. And unlike the modern 9 to 5, work here is sun up to sundown, with your only union being the gods, and they are terrible negotiators. Closing parenthesis. 1. The farmer. Backbone of the economy and the blisters. Let's start with the farmers, because without them, the rest of the city starves. If you're a farmer, you're not living in the city center. Your home is on the outskirts, closer to the fields. And your alarm clock, the first light of dawn, and the bleating of goats. There's no snooze button. Your work begins with irrigation. In a land between two rivers, you'd think water would be everywhere. The problem is getting it where you need it, when you need it. You and your neighbors maintain a network of canals, ditches, and levees. This means digging, patching, and redirecting water every few days. Miss a day, and your barley field turns into a dry patch of cracked earth, or worse, a swamp. Barley is the main crop because it tolerates the salty soil better than wheat. You plow the fields with wooden plows tipped with copper blades, pulled by oxen. It's slow, heavy work, and the sun feels like it's actively trying to kill you by the third hour. Sowing seeds is easy enough. But weeding and chasing pests, that's the daily grind. Locusts, birds, and mice see your hard work as an all-you-can-eat buffet. You spend hours shooing them away, cursing like a sailor in Akkadian. Harvest season is chaos. Everyone works, family, neighbors, hired hands, even children old enough to carry a basket. You cut the barley with flint sickles, bundle it, and haul it to be threshed. The thresher, usually a pair of oxen dragging a heavy wooden board steadied with flint across the grain to separate it from the chaff. Once the grain is ready, you owe a portion to the temple taxes, another to the local governor, more taxes, and whatever's left is yours to eat, brew, or trade. The temple scribes record every sheaf you deliver on clay tablets, Monsieur Quota, and they'll remind you with a fine or confiscation. By sunset, you're covered in dust, sweat, and barley husks, with just enough energy to eat, collapse, and do it all again tomorrow. 2. The artisan, creator of the city's good sif. Farming isn't your thing. Maybe you're an artisan, potter, weaver, carpenter, or metalworker. Your day starts early, too, because daylight is your best friend. The potter sits at a kickwheel, spinning clay from the riverbank into bowls, jars, and beer mugs. It's repetitive, but oddly meditative, until a customer demands their order yesterday, or a batch cracks in the kiln because someone didn't keep the fire hot enough. The weaver works in a dim, cool room, surrounded by vertical looms, strung with linen or wool. Linen comes from flax plants, a lot of soaking, beating, and spinning involved, while wool comes from sheep, which means you also smell faintly of wet animal. The patterns are simple for most folk, but if you're weaving for the rich, expect more intricate designs dyed with expensive colors, like lapis or madder. The carpenter shapes wood into furniture, doors, carts, and tools. Wood is precious here. Much of it is imported, so mistakes are costly. You use copper saws, chisels, and bow drills, sharpening them constantly. The smell of fresh-cut cedar or date palm wood is a rare pleasure. The metalworker works with copper, bronze, gold, or silver. Bronze, a mix of copper and tin, is the main metal for tools and weapons. Your forge is small, but hot enough to make you sweat buckets. You hammer out blades, chisels, jewelry, and decorative items for the temple. The downside? Tin is imported from far away, so when supplies run low, your hammer sits idle. Artisans often work in small workshops clustered together in the city. You sell directly to customers or through merchants who take a cut. Business is steady, but you're always at the mercy of raw material prices and the temple's demands. 3. The merchant. Master of the hustle. If you've got a silver tongue and some starting capital, you might be a merchant. Your work isn't about muscle. It's about strategy, risk, and knowing exactly how much you can cheat a customer without getting cursed by the gods. You might sell goods you make yourself, but the real money is in trade. Mesopotamia is a hub between cultures. Goods flow in from the Indus Valley, Anatolia, Egypt, and beyond. You deal in grain, textiles, copper, tin, lapis lazuli, spices, oils, and sometimes exotic animals. Your day starts at the market, where you set up your stall. You display your goods in the best light, literally, since sunlight makes dyed fabrics look richer. You haggle constantly, because no one here pays the first price you name. A skilled merchant can turn a handful of barley into enough profit to buy meat for dinner. Long-distance merchants have it rougher. You travel in caravans, facing bandits, storms, and corrupt officials at checkpoints. But the rewards are huge. One successful trip could make you rich enough to own land and hire workers. 4. The scribe. White collar in a clay world. If you're literate, a rare privilege. You're a scribe, the ancient equivalent of both accountant and bureaucrat. Your tools, a stylus made of reed, soft clay tablets, and an inkless smudge-proof font called cuneiform. You spend your day hunched over low tables, pressing wedge-shaped marks into clay. You record grain deliveries, legal contracts, debts, trade agreements, and temple inventories. You also copy myths, hymns, and omens. Accuracy is everything. One wrong mark, and someone loses their property or their head. Scribes often work for temples, palaces, or wealthy merchants. The job comes with status and better pay than manual labor, but it's not without pressure. You're trusted with sensitive information, and mistakes can have serious consequences. Still, compared to breaking your back in a field, it's a cushy gig. 5. The laborer, the muscle of Mesopotamia. You have no land, no trade, and no literacy. You work with your hands and your back for whoever will pay. You might haul clay for builders, carry goods for merchants, or work in gangs digging irrigation canals. The work is hot, heavy, and often dangerous. You're paid in food, beer, or a few copper coins. There's no job security. If you're injured, you're replaced instantly. Large construction projects, like building city walls or temples, need hundreds of laborers. You lift mud brick after mud brick, mixing straw and clay, stamping bricks with the ruler's seal, and stacking them into place. The work is rhythmic, almost hypnotic, until someone drops a brick on your foot. 6. The temple worker, servant of the gods, and the priests. Temples are more than religious centers. They're massive economic engines. If you work here, your job might be farming temple lands, brewing beer for offerings, baking bread for ceremonies, or tending sacred animals. Some temple workers are effectively staff for the priests, preparing incense, cleaning altars, and organizing festivals. Others are specialists, musicians, singers, or dancers for rituals. Temple service can be lifelong, especially if you were dedicated to the gods as a child by your parents. 7. The slave, work. Without end, slavery exists here, sometimes as a punishment for debt, sometimes as the result of war. Slaves do everything from housework to field labor to skilled crafts, depending on their abilities. Some can buy their freedom, but most remain bound for life. The workday rhythm regardless of your job. The day follows the sun. Dawn, work begins. Cool air, long shadows. Midday, the heat peaks. If possible, you take a short rest in the shade and drink beer or water. Afternoon, slower pace, but still working until the light fades. Evening, tools are stored, goods covered, and workers head home. Festivals and holy days are the only real breaks, and even then, someone's working to prepare food, music, and offerings. What work means here, work isn't just about survival. It's tied to identity and status. A farmer is respected for feeding the city, a merchant for bringing in wealth, a scribe for holding knowledge, but everyone knows their place in the hierarchy, and stepping outside it without permission can bring trouble fast. By the time the last light fades and the city settles into the hum of night, every muscle aches. You've earned your bread, your beer, and your brief rest before tomorrow starts it all again. That's your Mesopotamian workday, equal parts grit, skill, and stubborn willpower. Food beyond breakfast. Breakfast got you out the door. Lunch and dinner. They keep you moving, keep you social, and sometimes, if the gods are feeling generous, turn into all-out celebrations that blur the line between eating and religion. In Mesopotamia, food is never just food. It's economy, it's ritual, it's status, and, occasionally, it's an excuse to show off how many goats you can afford to roast in one afternoon. 1. The midday meal, practical, portable, and usually warm like the modern lunch break with neat little sandwiches. Your Mesopotamian midday meal is more rustic. You're eating what you can carry, or what's already been cooking since dawn. If you're a farmer, you've brought a clay pot of stew, barley, onions, leeks, maybe lentils if they're in season, left simmering in the embers while you worked. You eat it with flatbread baked that morning, using the bread as both spoon and plate. If you're a merchant, you probably grab something from a street vendor. These vendors sell skewers of roasted lamb, bowls of fish stew, or bread pockets stuffed with dates and nuts. The city smells like smoke, spice, and sizzling fat during lunch hours, which is frankly unfair to anyone who's broke. Artisans often eat in the workshop. Someone's wife or hired cook brings the meal in baskets, bread, cheese, pickled vegetables, and a jug of beer. It's eaten quickly, because kilns don't stoke themselves and bronze doesn't hammer itself into shape. Scribes and other temple workers, they eat in shaded courtyards, sitting cross-legged on reed mats. Meals are often provided by the temple itself. Lentil soup, barley bread, figs, and small amounts of goat cheese. It's plain, but reliable. 2. The market snacks, Mesopotamian. Street food, yes, there's street food, and it's surprisingly varied. Imagine wandering through a bustling market and seeing grilled river fish wrapped in palm leaves, roasted chickpeas tossed with herbs, date cakes bound with honey and sprinkled with sesame seeds, barley cakes fried in oil for extra crunch, onion-stuffed flatbread sizzling on a hot clay griddle. The flavors lean heavily toward savory, sour, and sweet savory. Since sugar as we know it doesn't exist, honey and dates are the sweeteners of choice. 3. The evening meal, bigger, slower, more social dinners where people finally sit and talk. Work is done, the heat has faded, and families gather in the courtyard or rooftop. If you're wealthy, you might dine indoors, with servants fanning you. If you're poor, you're outside, hoping the breeze keeps the flies off your food. Staples on the table: barley bread, flat, thick, and chewy. Stews, lamb, goat, beef, or fish, slow-cooked with onions, leeks, garlic, and sometimes turnips or carrots. Pickled vegetables, cucumbers, radishes, or turnips stored in brine. Fresh herbs, coriander, dill, and mint. Pulses, lentils, chickpeas, beans. Meat isn't daily fare for the poor. It's expensive, so most dinners are vegetarian, unless you've had a good harvest, a successful sale, or a festival. Fish from the rivers is more common, grilled, stewed, or salted for storage. 4. The cooking methods without ovens like ours. Mesopotamians rely on clay ovens, tenners, tall, beehive-shaped, heated by burning wood or reeds inside. Bread is slapped against the walls to bake in minutes. Hearth pots, heavy clay pots set over embers for stewing. Griddle, flat clay or metal surfaces heated from below, perfect for frying bread. Roasting pits dug in the ground, lined with hot stones, used for whole animals during feasts. Seasoning is simple, but flavorful. Coriander, cumin, garlic, onion, mint, and occasionally imported cinnamon for the wealthy. Salt is everywhere, from riverbeds and trade routes, and is essential, not just for taste, but for preservation. 5. Beer, the lifeblood of Mesopotamian. You cannot talk about Mesopotamian meals without beer. Beer is the drink, not wine too expensive, and not water often unsafe unless from a clean canal or well. Made from fermented barley bread. Mesopotamian beer is thick, cloudy, and drunk through long reed straws to avoid the floating bits of grain husk. There are light beers for everyday use, and stronger brews for feasts. It's not just for adults. Beer is a staple for everyone, including children, because it's safer than stagnant water and full of calories. 6. Feasts, the ancient banquet. Culture, when a festival, marriage, royal coronation, or temple dedication happens, the evening meal becomes a spectacle. A feast might include roast lamb or goat, seasoned with garlic, coriander, and cumin. Whole fish, stuffed with leeks and herbs, grilled over open flame. Baskets of fresh bread, both flatbreads and risen loaves for the rich. Figs, dates, and pomegranates piled high for desserts. Honeyed pastries, deep-fried dough balls, dipped in honey and sprinkled with sesame seeds. Entertainment accompanies the food. Musicians with lyres and drums, dancers, acrobats, even trained monkeys or dogs. Nobles use feasts to show their wealth. More meat, more imported spices, and more beer than anyone else can afford. The downside: overeating and drunkenness are common enough that scribes occasionally record temple warnings about excess leading to disorder. 7. Religious offerings and sacred meals. Some meals aren't just eaten, they're offered to the gods first. Temples receive vast quantities of grain, meat, and beer as offerings. Priests dedicate part of these to the gods, then redistribute the rest to temple workers and the poor. On holy days, worshippers might bring a share of their best produce, which is cooked on site and eaten communally. It's part worship, part social event, and part very clever way for temples to control food distribution. Point 8. Seasonal eating. Food varies with the seasons. Spring, fresh herbs, early barley, lamb, young. Vegetables. Summer, dates, melons, cucumbers, plenty of beer to survive the heat. Autumn, harvest grains, figs, pomegranates, pulses. Winter, dried fish, pickled vegetables, stored grains, dried legumes. Preservation is key. Salting fish, drying fruits, fermenting vegetables, and storing grain in sealed clay bins keeps people fed in lean months. 9. Table manners. Mesopotamian style. Forget forks and knives. You eat with your hands or with small wooden spoons for soups. Bread doubles as your utensil. Meals are often shared from a central dish, everyone dipping in with right hands. The left is considered unclean. Sitting posture is cross-legged on mats, or reclining on cushions if you're wealthy. Drinking beer from a shared jar with long straws is common. Each person has their own straw, but the jar is communal. 10. Food and class. Food is the clearest sign of status. Poor households, mostly barley bread, vegetable stews, and beer. Meat is rare. Middle-class artisans, merchants, more variety. Fish, occasional lamb, spices, imported fruit. Wealthy and noble families, daily meat, imported delicacies, wines, elaborate pastries, and exotic spices. Even cooking vessels differ. Poor people use plain clay. Rich homes have decorated or imported metal dishes. Point 11. Food laws and taboos. Mesopotamia doesn't have strict food taboos like some later cultures, but certain foods are associated with status or ritual. For example, temple-raised animals are reserved for offerings, and eating them without permission is a serious offense. There's also superstition around certain river fish. Some are considered unclean during specific months due to spawning, thought to bring bad luck. 12 night snacks and late suppers. Yes, late night eating exists. In hot months, some people prefer to eat their main meal after dark. Markets stay open late during festivals, selling warm bread straight from the oven. Roasted lamb skewers, honeyed date balls, cool melon slices. By lamplight, the streets feel alive. Food vendors shouting, musicians playing, kids chasing each other between stalls. It's the closest thing to a nightlife district in ancient Mesopotamia. Why food is everything here. Food isn't just survival, it's identity. The crops you grow, the spices you can afford, the beer you drink, all signal who you are and where you stand. Food connects every part of Mesopotamian life. Economy. Grain is currency. Beer is wages. Religion. Offerings feed both gods and people. Culture. Feasts display power and generosity. Family. Evening meals keep households united. From a single flatbread eaten alone to a feast of 50 roasted lambs, food tells the story of the people who lived between the rivers. Homes and domestic life. When you think of home in ancient Mesopotamia, forget the romanticized idea of mud huts or constant chaos. These people invented urban living. They built the world's first cities, and with cities came houses, streets, neighbors you liked, and neighbors you prayed would move to another district. Your house wasn't just where you slept. It was a workplace, a storage unit, a family archive. a temple corner, and sometimes a fortress when things got messy. 1. Materials and building. Techniques. Mesopotamia is famously short on stone and timber, so architecture here is all about mud brick, clay mixed with straw, shaped into bricks, and dried in the sun. Mud brick is cheap, easy to make, and perfect for the climate. It stays cool in summer and holds heat in winter. The only problem, rain is its mortal enemy, which is why walls need yearly repairs, and houses have short lifespans unless constantly maintained. Construction basics. Bricks are bonded with mud, mortar. Outer walls are often coated with mud plaster to protect from erosion. Wooden beams from imported timber are used for roofs. Roofs are flat, covered in red mats and mud layers. Wealthier homes might use baked bricks for important walls, more expensive, but far more durable. 2. The urban layout. Streets and neighborhoods. Cities are tight, dense, and organic. No neat grids unless a ruler decides to rebuild after a flood. Main streets are wide enough for carts and lined with shops. Side streets twist like mazes, often ending in dead ends. Alleys are narrow, sometimes so tight you can touch both walls at once. Houses are packed closely together, sharing walls. To save on materials. Privacy isn't much of a thing. Your neighbor knows when you're cooking fish, arguing with your spouse, or singing badly after too much beer. 3. House types by class. Poor households. 1 or 2 small rooms, usually just 1 story. The main space is multi-purpose cooking, sleeping, eating, all in one. The roof serves as an extra room in summer. Middle-class homes. Artisans, merchants, scribes. 2 stories, built around a small courtyard that brings in light and air. Ground floor is for work, storage, and cooking. Upper floor for sleeping. Wealthy homes. Large multi-room houses with big central courtyards. Private shrines, separate kitchens, and even guest rooms. Walls are sometimes plastered and painted. Floors paved with fired brick. 4. The courtyard. The heart of the home. Almost every home, rich or poor, has a courtyard. The essential design feature. Functions. Lets in daylight, since windows are rare. Allows ventilation in hot weather. Space for drying clothes, processing food, and sometimes keeping animals. Family gatherings and evening meals happen here at night. People might sleep on mats in the courtyard under the stars, especially during the sweltering summers. 5. Roof life. The ancient rooftop culture. Flat roofs aren't just architecture, they're lifestyle uses. Sleeping in summer, drying fruits, herbs, and laundry. Hosting evening chats with neighbors. A vantage point for spying on street gossip. Don't pretend you wouldn't. Children play up here, and some families keep pigeons or chickens on rooftops. The only risk, the occasional drunk falling into the street. 6. Lighting, heating, and cooling. Lighting. Clay oil lamps fueled by sesame oil or animal fat. They give dim, flickering light and a bit of smoke. Heating. Braziers with charcoal or wood in winter. Cooling. Shade, ventilation from courtyards, and occasionally sprinkling water on floors and walls to cool the air by evaporation. 7. Furniture and household items. Picture empty mudrooms. Mesopotamian homes had plenty of furniture, but it was functional, not decorative, unless you were rich. Common items. Reed mats for sitting and sleeping. Low wooden stools or benches. Clay jars for grain, beer, and water storage. Baskets woven from reeds for food storage. Wooden chests for valuables. Wealthy homes might have carved wooden chairs with animal leg designs, bronze or copper bowls, and serving dishes. Wall paintings or decorative clay reliefs. 8. Kitchens and cooking. Spaces. Most homes have no separate kitchen. Cooking is done in a corner or in the courtyard. Fireplaces are simple clay hearths or portable clay ovens. Utensils. Clay or bronze pots for stewing. Flat griddles for bread. Wooden spoons and ladles. Grinding stones for flour. In larger homes, kitchens might have built-in ovens and dedicated storage rooms for food. Servants do the cooking while the family eats in another area. 9. Water and waste management. Water comes from wells, canals, or public fountains. Wealthy houses sometimes have their own wells in the courtyard. Waste disposal is primitive. Chamber pots are emptied into cesspits or street drains. The smell in summer. Let's just say you're glad incense exists. Some wealthier areas have basic drainage channels to carry wastewater away, but these often clog. City maintenance is hit or miss depending on the ruler's priorities. 10. Daily chores. Life is work, even at home. Typical household chores. Grinding grain into flour, a long, tiring task. Baking bread, fetching water, cooking and brewing beer. Weaving cloth on upright looms, making and mending clothes. Cleaning and repairing mud brick walls. Caring for children and elderly relatives. Wealthier households delegate most of this to servants or enslaved workers, but even they supervise and manage the labor. 11. Family structure and roles. The household is ruled by the patriarch, the oldest male. His word is law in most matters. Women run the domestic economy, managing food stores, organizing servants, making cloth, and raising children. Wealthy women may also own property, lend money, or run small businesses. Children help from a young age. Boys might learn the family trade. Girls assist in household tasks. Education is rare, unless you're from a family that can afford a scribe. School. 12. Domestic religion. Shrines at home. Every home has a small altar or niche for household gods and protective spirits. Offerings of bread, beer, or incense are made regularly. Common figures include Lama, protective goddess; Pazuzu, fierce demon to ward off evil; Ishtar or Enki, for fertility and prosperity. Neglecting your household shrine is asking for trouble, illness, bad luck, or the neighbor's goat mysteriously eating your date harvest. 13. Neighbors and social life. You can't escape your neighbors, and that's not always bad. Daily life includes sharing bread or beer, helping each other with repairs, gossiping in doorways, watching each other's kids, but also arguments over noisy animals, complaints about smells from someone's kitchen, disputes about stolen tools or borrowed grain. The street is an extension of your home. Kids play there, merchants set up stalls outside, and you see the same faces every day. 14. Security and privacy. Doors are simple wooden planks with bar locks. Windows are rare, and when they exist, they're small and high on the wall to keep out thieves. At night, gates to certain districts are closed. Wealthy homes sometimes have guards, but most rely on locked doors and watchful neighbors. 15. Household superstitions. Mesopotamians are deeply superstitious about home life. Common beliefs. Sweeping after dark may sweep away good fortune. Spilling beer is bad luck, unless it's part of an offering. Whistling indoors invites spirits. A lizard inside means unexpected guests are coming. Protective amulets are hung over doorways, clay plaques with fierce-looking demons or gods to keep evil out. 16. Repairs and renovations. Houses need constant upkeep. Every year after the rainy season, families patch walls, recoat plaster, and replace roof mats. If you're wealthy, you hire laborers. If not, it's a family affair, mixing clay, carrying bricks, and smearing mud plaster by hand. Why homes? Define Mesopotamian life. Your house is your fortress, your workshop, your family's anchor in a crowded, noisy city. It's also your social signal. Its size, condition, and location say a lot about your wealth and influence. And unlike temples or palaces, these homes aren't monuments. They're lived in, patched up, rebuilt, and eventually absorbed into the earth, layer upon layer. Exactly why archaeologists can dig down and read the city's history like a cake of mud and time. Clothing and personal adornment. If the Mesopotamians were the pioneers of cities, writing, and law, they were also masters of style, not in the modern fashion week sense, but in the your clothes, tell everyone your rank, your job, and how much barley you can afford sense. They didn't just dress for comfort. They dressed for identity, for ritual, for politics, and sometimes for sheer vanity. 1. Materials. What they wore and why Mesopotamian textiles were mainly wool. The most important material produced from domesticated sheep, soft, warm, and friendly. Linen made from flax, cooler than wool, more expensive, often used by the wealthy and for ceremonial garments. Leather for belts, sandals, and sometimes outer garments. Reeds and fibers for rough work. Clothes or accessories. Silk. Nope, that's still centuries away. Cotton, rare in the early periods. Appears more later, from trade with the Indus Valley. 2. The process. From sheep to shirt. The making of clothes starts with sheep shearing in late spring. Wool is cleaned, carded, and spun into yarn using drop spindles. Yarn is woven on upright looms, usually operated by women, in households or in temple workshops. Weaving is so important that some gods like Ud, the goddess of weaving, are patrons of the craft. 3. Dyes and colors. Natural dyes give a surprisingly rich palette. Red from madder root, yellow from saffron or pomegranate rind, blue from indigo or woad, black from iron-rich mud or charred plant matter. Bright colors are expensive. Deep blues and purples are a statement. You're showing that you can afford the labor and the materials. 4. Clothing for Mente, earliest style. Sumerian period is the kaunex, a skirt made of tufted wool, looking almost like rows of sheep. Fleece, by later periods. Men wear wraparound skirts or kilts tied at the waist. Tunics appear, simple T-shaped garments with short sleeves. In colder weather, cloaks or shawls are draped over the shoulder. Officials and kings wear longer robes with elaborate fringes, patterned borders, and sometimes embroidery. 5. Clothing for women. Women's garments are generally longer and more modest, but also more decorated. Long skirts, often with pleated or flounced hems. Draped shawls or cloaks that cover the shoulders and head. In wealthier circles, gowns of fine linen, embroidered with geometric or floral designs. Elite women's clothes often signal their husband's or father's status, and jewelry completes the effect. 6. Seasonal adjustments. Summer, lighter, linen, or loosely woven wool. Bare arms and shoulders are common for working people. Winter, layered wool garments, heavier cloaks, and head coverings for warmth, even in hot weather. Priests and officials may wear heavier garments for ceremonial reasons, because ritual. Fashion doesn't care about heat stroke. 7. Shoes and footwear. In early times, many went barefoot, especially indoors or in fields. Sandals made of leather or woven reeds were common for travel or city wear. Wealthy people might own leather boots for riding or hunting. 8. Hairstyles. More than vanity, hair is a public statement in Mesopotamia. Men, early Sumerian men, often shave their heads and faces. Later periods favor neatly trimmed beards or styled curls. Kings and high officials might oil and curl their beards into elaborate ringlets. Women, long hair is the norm, often braided or tied up with ribbons. Elite women may wear decorative headbands or hair is oiled for shine and health. Shaving the head entirely is rare, except for certain priests or during mourning. 9. Jewelry and accessories. Jewelry isn't just decoration, it's wealth you can wear. Common types: necklaces of beads, lapis, lazuli, carnelian, gold, earrings, gold hoops, or studs, bracelets and anklets often in pairs, rings, both decorative and with seals. Materials: gold and silver for the wealthy, copper, bronze, shell, and stone beads for everyone else. Lapis lazuli, imported from Afghanistan, is the superstar gemstone of Mesopotamia, often paired with gold. 10. Makeup and perfume. Yes, Mesopotamians used makeup. Kohl from ground, galena to darken eyes, reduce glare, and supposedly ward off evil spirits. Red ochre for lip and cheek color. Perfumed oils from myrrh, cedar, or roses to mask the less than delightful sense of city life. Perfume is a sign of refinement, and temples sometimes distribute scented oils during festivals. 11. Clothing by class. Lower class. Simple wool skirts or tunics, undyed or in basic colors. Sandals optional. Middle class. Dyed garments, maybe patterned borders, some jewelry of copper or shell. Elite. Fine linen or richly dyed wool, embroidered hems, fringes, gold, and lapis jewelry. Perfumes. Clothing laws sometimes regulate who can wear certain colors or styles. Kings don't want merchants dressing like royalty. 12. Work clothing versus ceremonial dress. Farmers, laborers, and fishermen wear short skirts or wrap cloths for mobility. Craftsmen and merchants might wear tunics. Priests, officials, and royalty have separate wardrobes for ritual use. Heavy ornate garments, often decorated with symbols of their gods or authority. 13. Military gear. Soldiers wear tunics or kilts, with leather belts, sometimes reinforced with bronze plates. Helmets are leather or bronze. Cloaks keep dust and rain off during campaigns. Weapons and shields are part of the look. Nothing says "don't mess with me" like a shiny spear and a thick beard. 14. Children's clothing. Young children often go without much clothing in the heat. As they grow, they wear smaller versions of adult garments. Wealthy children may have embroidered hems or bright dyes, a kind of ancient flex by the parents. 15. Grooming tools and carecommon items found in excavations. Bronze razors, combs of bone or wood, tweezers for facial hair, small jars for oils and perfumes. Personal hygiene is tied to social respectability. Looking neat is a sign of discipline and status. 16. Clothing as identity and politics in Mesopotamia. What you wear can literally define your legal rights. Certain garments mark you as a priest, a slave, a merchant, or a member of the court. Ignoring dress codes can be dangerous. Wearing royal colors without permission might get you fined or worse. 17. Burial clothing. When people are buried, they're often dressed in fine garments and adorned with jewelry, the belief being that you should enter the afterlife looking presentable to the gods. Some graves contain changes of clothing and extra jewelry, a heavenly wardrobe upgrade. Why fashion mattered. Clothing in Mesopotamia was more than function. It was a public language, a silent declaration of your wealth, occupation, religion, and ambitions. From the humble reed sandals of a fisherman to the gold-fringed robes of a king, every stitch and bead spoke volumes in the crowded streets of Ur and Babylon. Entertainment and music. You might imagine life in ancient Mesopotamia as an endless grind of farming, trading, and temple duties. And yes, it was often exhausting. But these people also knew how to have fun. Their entertainment wasn't Netflix hinge, it was LYRES-end-lively. 1. Festivals. The heartbeat of joy. Life was punctuated by festivals, and not just once or twice a year. Seasonal planting and harvest celebrations, religious holidays, royal anniversaries, and military victories were all excuses for big public events. Aka Festival, the New Year celebration in Babylon, was the grandest, lasting 12 days. It included parades of statues of the gods, recitations of epic myths, banquets, music and dancing. The king publicly reaffirming his divine mandate after being ritually humbled by the high priest. Yes, they literally made the king cry for good luck. Festivals meant free food, beer, and a chance to mingle, and for some maybe sneak a little flirting in the crowd. 2. Music everywhere. Music was woven into daily life, religious rituals, taverns, royal courts, and even battle marches. Instruments included lyres and harps, the stars of Mesopotamian music, used in temples and for entertainment. Drums and tambourines, especially in festivals and processions. Flutes and reed pipes, for softer melodies. Cymbals and clappers, to keep rhythm in dances. Some temples had full-time musicians. Music was seen as a gift to the gods. 3. Singing and storytelling. Professional singers and bards performed epic poetry, myths, and love songs. The Epic of Gilgamesh wasn't read silently, it was performed. Storytellers used exaggerated gestures and voices, sometimes with musical accompaniment. At taverns, they might tell Bodhi tales. At temples, they'd recite hymns. 4. Dance. Structured and social dance styles ranged from slow, formal steps in temple processions to lively group dances during festivals. Women often danced in circles, while men performed more energetic moves. Elite banquets sometimes featured dancers hired to entertain guests, often accompanied by drummers. 5. Board games, the ancient pastime. Mesopotamians loved games, and the royal game of yore is the most famous. A two-player race game with pieces and dice-like objects, tetrahedral dice, or knuckle bones. Played for fun, but possibly also with a gambling element. Archaeologists have found boards made of wood inlaid with shell, lapis, and limestone. Poorer folk might play simpler versions, scratched into clay or wood. 6. Sports and physical games. While they didn't have organized leagues like today, physical activities were common. Wrestling often depicted in art, both as training and competition. Hunting for kings and nobles. This was both sport and political theater. Lion hunts, especially, were a royal flex. Foot races, probably part of festivals. Javelin or spear throwing, for military training and fun. 7. Drinking and tavern. Culture taverns were social hubs, and not just for men. Women could run and own taverns, serving beer, wine, rare, and sometimes food. Games, gossip, music, and the occasional argument breaking into a wrestling match. All part of the tavern package. 8. Erotic entertainment. Some festivals especially. Fertility ones involved openly sensual performances and songs. While not entertainment in our modern PG sense, it was tied to religious beliefs about fertility, prosperity, and the cycles of life. 9. Street performers in bustling cities. You might see jugglers, acrobats, animal handlers with trained monkeys or dogs, musicians playing for coins. 10. Children's fun. Children played with clay balls and figurines, toy carts and animals, simple board games, running and wrestling in the streets. They also imitated adult activities, mock markets, pretend farming, because even fun was preparation for adult life. 11. Banquets and feasts for the wealthy. Banquets were events. Guests reclined or sat on cushions, tables or mats, piled with bread, meat, dates, cheese. Musicians and dancers performed between courses. Drinking contests sometimes broke out and sometimes ended badly. 12. Entertainment and status. Just like clothing, entertainment reflected class. Elites had private musicians, imported delicacies, and trained dancers. Commoners enjoyed public festivals, taverns, and street games. But in the city square, during a big celebration, those lines blurred. Music and beer don't care about your social rank. 13. The role of entertainment in religion. Many fun activities doubled as offerings to the gods. Music, dance, feasting, and storytelling were seen as ways to please deities and ensure prosperity. In some cases, entire plays or dramatic reenactments were performed for religious purposes, including retelling creation myths or the deeds of patron gods. Why it all mattered. Entertainment wasn't just a distraction, it was a social glue. Festivals united rich and poor, music reinforced shared stories, games built bonds, and performances reminded people of their place in a larger cosmic order. In the dust and heat of the Mesopotamian day, laughter, music, and games kept life human. and gave everyone something to look forward to beyond the next tax payment or irrigation repair. Love, marriage, and family life. If you're imagining Mesopotamian romance as long walks by the Euphrates and poetry under the stars, well, you're not entirely wrong. They had love poems that could make even a modern Instagram poet blush. But in practice, marriage here was less about butterflies and more about barley. 1. The role of marriage was a cornerstone of society, but it was primarily an economic and social arrangement, not just an emotional choice. It linked families, secured property rights, and ensured legitimate heirs. The Sumerian marriage contract was essentially a business deal. The groom's family gave a bride price to the bride's family. The bride's family often provided a dowry, clothing, household goods, sometimes slaves. Both sides signed literally and pressed the terms into clay tablets, with witnesses. Love could be a bonus, but security, alliance, and social status came first. Point 2. Falling in love. Mesopotamians styled this by the legal side. Mesopotamians did fall in love. We have passionate poetry from as far back as 2000 BCE, like the famous love songs of Inanna and Dumuzi, which are full of earthy metaphors about gardens, grain, and milk. In cities, young people might meet at festivals and the market, through family introductions, but don't expect a long courtship. If the families agreed, the marriage could happen fast. 3. Weddings, a community affair. Mesopotamian wedding was a public event, often involving a procession to the groom's house, feasting, music, and dancing. Religious blessings especially, invoking Inanna Ishtar for fertility. Presentation of the dowry and gifts. Once the bride crossed the groom's threshold, she was officially part of his household. 4 roles in the household: husband, head of the household, responsible for providing and protecting. Wife managed the home, children, servants, and sometimes business dealings. Women could own property, run taverns, and in some cases be priestesses or scribes. But domestic duties were the norm. 5. Children, a precious investment. Children weren't just beloved family members. They were the retirement plan. Sons carried on the family name, worked the land, and cared for aging parents. Daughters often married into other families, strengthening alliances. Infant mortality was high, so having multiple children was both common and necessary. 6. Extended family and in-laws. Multi-generational households were common. Grandparents, uncles, cousins, all under one roof or close by. This meant built-in childcare, and also built-in gossip. Your in-laws could be your greatest support network or your greatest headache. 7. Divorce and separation. Yes, divorce existed. Common reasons: infertility, especially blamed on the wife, neglect or abandonment, severe conflict or abuse. Divorce terms were written into contracts. Dowries were often returned, unless adultery was involved. 8. Widowhood and remarriage. Widows could remarry, and often did for protection and economic security. In some cases, they managed their deceased husband's property until sons came of age. 9. Romance outside marriage. It happened. Love affairs, affairs with slaves or servants, and prostitution all existed. Some temple complexes had sacred prostitution, tied to fertility rites, though scholars debate the details. 10. Family life. Day-to-day life was busy. Mornings started with chores and work. Meals were shared, often with bread as the centerpiece. Evenings might include storytelling, music, or board games. Family unity was essential. Survival depended on cooperation. 11. Parental authority. Parents had significant control over children's lives, especially in arranging marriages. Disobeying could mean legal consequences. 12. Adoption. Adoption was common, not just for orphans, but for securing heirs or labor. Contracts spelled out the adopted child's duties and inheritance rights. 13. the emotional side. While much of marriage was practical, surviving letters show deep affection between spouses, wives writing to traveling husbands, asking them to come home, husbands sending gifts or food from afar. These glimpses remind us that beyond the contracts and customs, human hearts beat the same way they do today. In Mesopotamia, love could be poetic, messy, political, and practical all at once. And whether it started with a contract or a spark at a festival, the ultimate goal was the same: family, stability, and a place in the story of the city. Death, burial, and the afterlife. Mesopotamians took death seriously, but not in the way we think of it today. Their beliefs were neither glowing promises of eternal bliss, nor fiery warnings of eternal torment. Instead, the afterlife was inevitable, a bit gloomy, and something you just had to prepare for, like paying taxes or sitting through a very long family dinner. In their worldview, everyone, king, farmer, merchant, or scribe, ended up in the same place, the underworld, also called the land of no return. 1. The Mesopotamian view of death. For the people of Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, and Assyria, death wasn't a moral verdict. It was simply a shift from one state of existence to another. You died, your spirit left your body, and you joined the ranks of the Itamu, the shadowy dead. The underworld wasn't a punishment, but it also wasn't a reward. It was there. Your main concern wasn't escaping it. It was making sure you got there properly, and that your family remembered you with offerings. 2. The underworld. Layout and vibe. According to myths, especially the descent of Inanna. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the underworld was ruled by Ereshkigal, the queen of the dead. Her realm was a dim, dusty place. No sunlight, no fresh water, only the food and drink your living relatives sent you. Inhabitants were shades, wearing feathers like birds, whispering in the gloom. It was surrounded by gates, guarded by demons, who made sure no one left without permission. 3. The journey after death. Here's how it went. According to belief, your body died. Your Zai life force left it. Your spirit traveled down through the earth, passing gatekeepers. You stood before Ereshkigal and her court, not for moral judgment, but for entry registration. You joined the community of the dead, where your well-being depended entirely on offerings from the living. If no one performed the proper rites, your spirit could wander the earth, restless. Not a great fate. 4. Funeral customs. Burial practices varied by time and place, but there were common patterns. Body preparation. The body was washed, anointed with oils, and wrapped in cloth. Sometimes personal items or amulets were placed with the deceased, not to help in the afterlife, but as part of ritual respect. Graves and tombs. Poorer families might bury loved ones in the ground under the house. Yes, literally, under the floor. Wealthier people had separate family tombs or stone sarcophagi. Royal burials could be elaborate, such as the famous royal cemetery of yore, where attendants were buried with the ruler, possibly voluntarily, possibly not. Grave goods. Cups, bowls, jars, to hold offerings, jewelry and clothing, tools or weapons, depending on status. 5. Mourning rituals. Mourning was public and emotional. Relatives tore their clothes, covered themselves in dust or ashes, and wailed. Professional mourners, yes, hired criers, sometimes joined in to make it more dramatic. The mourning period could last days or weeks, with regular offerings at the grave. 6. Offerings to the dead. This was the key to a decent afterlife. The dead needed food and drink, not physically, but spiritually. If you were forgotten, you'd go hungry in the underworld. Offerings included bread, beer, dates, water, precious for spirits in the dry underworld. Families might pour water through special clay pipes into the grave. 7. Ancestor worship. While Mesopotamians didn't worship their dead like gods, they honored them through rituals. This was partly spiritual duty, partly practical. You didn't want angry ghosts showing up at night. Every year, families held kiss-poo feasts for their ancestors, sharing food and drink with both the living and the dead. 8. Ghosts, be it. Problem if proper funeral rites weren't performed, or if the person died violently, their spirit could linger as a ghost etimu. Ghost problems included sickness in the family, bad dreams, strange noises at night. Priests or exorcists could perform rituals to send the spirit to the underworld, often involving offerings, chants, and sometimes miniature figurines buried to stand in for the deceased. 9. Death and royal contexts. 4. Kings and nobles. Funerals were political theater. Enormous processions, offerings from all over the kingdom, burial with luxury items, gold lyres, lapis lazuli jewelry, chariots, and weapons. Sometimes retainers, musicians, and guards were buried alongside the ruler, and your archaeologists found entire death pits with dozens of attendants. 10. Myth and the afterlife. Mythology shaped how people imagined death. Epic of Gilgamesh. The hero's journey teaches that immortality is impossible, but living well and being remembered is the best path to lasting life. Descent of Inanna, the goddess of love and war, travels to the underworld, is stripped of her power at each gate, and experiences death before being revived, symbolizing cycles of life and death. These stories reinforce that death is inevitable. The underworld is unavoidable. Ritual remembrance matters. 11. Cemeteries and archaeology. We know much of this thanks to sites like your Kish and Nippur. Graves reveal social class differences. Some tombs are simple pits, others elaborate chambers. Grave goods reflecting daily life, cooking pots, tools, combs, and cosmetics. Evidence of feasts held right at burial sites. 12. The emotional reality. Death wasn't just a religious or cultural moment, it was deeply personal. Letters survive of people grieving lost loved ones, expressing fear for their well-being in the underworld. Some even begged the dead not to haunt them. 13. The afterlife. No exceptions. One of the most striking things in Mesopotamian thought. Everyone ended up in the same place. Kings didn't get palaces in the underworld, and criminals didn't burn forever. Your quality of afterlife wasn't about morality, it was about whether your living family remembered you. 14. Why? It mattered. This belief system shaped family loyalty. Keeping ancestors fed meant keeping them peaceful. Burial customs from humble household graves to royal tombs. The value of legacy, since fame and memory were the closest thing to immortality. 15. Comparison to modern views. While modern religions often promise a moralized afterlife, Mesopotamians accepted a more pragmatic fate. Death comes for everyone. The underworld is equal opportunity. Your living relatives can make your eternity better, or worse. This worldview probably made people focus more on this life, building wealth, family, and reputation now, because no heavenly upgrade was waiting later. Closing the clay tableton. The end. Mesopotamians faced death with a mix of resignation, ritual, and responsibility. They didn't imagine paradise or hellfire, just a shadowy continuation, sustained by the love and offerings of the living. And maybe, just maybe, that's why they built cities, wrote poems, carved monuments, and threw grand feasts. If you can't cheat death, at least you can leave something worth remembering. War, conquest, and the rise and fall of cities. Mesopotamia wasn't just the cradle of civilization, it was also the cradle of conflict. The same fertile floodplains that birthed agriculture also birthed some of the earliest organized warfare. City-states rose, kings built walls, and armies marched, and as soon as one city reached its peak, another was sharpening its bronze swords to bring it down. 1. Why Mesopotamia was a magnet for conflicta, land between the Tigris and Euphrates, was prime real estate, but also a nightmare for peacekeeping. Reasons: war was inevitable. Flat, open land, perfect for farming, terrible for defense. No mountains or jungles to hide behind. Fertile soil, everyone wanted it, and boundaries between cities were fuzzy at best. Shifting rivers, irrigation systems were lifelines, but also flat. Redirect someone's canal water, and you'd start a war. City-state rivalry. Each city had its own patron god, pride, and ambition, too. Early warfare. The Sumerian city-states in the 3rd millennium BCE. Sumer was a patchwork of fiercely independent cities like your Uruk, Lagash, and Oma. The earliest written war records aren't heroic poems, they're irrigation disputes. Example: the Lagashima conflict, around 2450 BCE, began over farmland along their border. The Stele of the Vultures, one of the oldest known war monuments, shows soldiers marching in formation, wearing helmets, carrying spears, and trampling the enemy. 3. The professionalization of armies. Mesopotamian warfare evolved quickly. Early on, militias of farmers called up in planting off-season. Later, standing armies, including professional soldiers, mercenaries, and chariot corps. Weapons: bronze-tipped spears and axes, composite bows, daggers, and short swords. Siege weapons, like battering rams. Yes, they had these 4,000 years ago. Armor: leather helmets early on, then bronze helmets for elite troops. Large rectangular shields, sometimes made from wood covered in leather. 4. Fortifications and defensive strategies. If your city didn't have walls, you weren't serious about survival. Cities built massive mud brick walls. Uruks were legendary, supposedly built by Gilgamesh himself in myth. Gates, with guard towers, moats, and outer ramparts. Walls weren't just military, they were symbols of power. A big wall said, "We're rich, strong, and too important to raid without serious effort." 5. The Akkadian Empire. First to unite the land in the 24th century BCE. Sargon of Akkad flipped the script. Instead of city fighting city forever, he created the first true empire in recorded history, conquered all of Sumer, extended north into Akkad and beyond, established a centralized army loyal to him, not local cities. His reign and those of his successors proved that unification was possible, but it also showed that holding such a vast territory required constant campaigning. 6. Assyrian military machine. Fast forward over 1,000 years, and the Assyrians turned warfare into a science of terror and logistics. Iron weapons harder and cheaper than bronze, siege towers, and advanced battering rams. Cavalry, not just chariots, but mounted archers. Psychological warfare, carving reliefs showing the brutal fate of rebels. They didn't just conquer, they deported entire populations, scattering enemies across the empire to prevent uprisings. 7. Babylonian strategies. Babylon's military strength was tied to political alliances, strong city defenses, and strategic use of rivers and canals. Famous leader Nebuchadnezzar, the 2nd 6th century BCE, was as much a builder as a conqueror. His walls, gates, and temples were part of his military strategy. 8. Economic impact of war wasn't just about territory, it was about resources. Capturing farmland meant more grain, which meant more tax revenue. Conquering trade cities gave control over caravan routes. Looting temples and palaces filled the treasury fast and annoyed enemy gods. But war also drained resources, rebuilding walls, feeding armies, repairing canals damaged in fighting. Some cities never recovered from a single defeat. 9. Religion and warfare. War was framed as divine will. Kings claimed their patron gods ordered them to expand territory. Victories were celebrated as proof of divine favor. Defeats were often blamed on neglecting the gods, requiring purification rituals. Before battle, armies performed sacrifices, and omens were taken. If the liver of a sacrificial sheep looked unfavorable, the campaign might be postponed. 10. The cycle of rise and fall. Mesopotamian history is a constant seesaw. City grows rich from farming trade, builds walls, expands influence. Neighbor gets jealous or ambitious. War breaks out. Victor takes land, resources, and prestige. New ruler enjoys prosperity. Until the next war, Ur rose and fell, Akkad rose and fell, Babylon rose and fell, multiple times. Even mighty Assyria eventually collapsed. 11. The human cost clay tablets and royal inscriptions love to talk about victories, but archaeology tells us war also meant cities burned and abandoned, mass graves, disrupted agriculture leading to famine, refugees fleeing to other regions. Point 12. Peace treaties and diplomacy. Not every dispute ended in bloodshed. We have records of border agreements written on clay, marriages between royal families to seal alliances, shared irrigation projects as peace incentives. But these treaties rarely lasted more than a generation before the next war started. 13. Warfare technology timeline summary. Early Sumer 3000 BCE, simple spears, axes, leather armor. Akkadian period 2300 BCE, bronze weapons, disciplined formations. Old Babylonian period 1800 BCE, chariots in large numbers. Neo-Assyrian period 900 BCE, iron weapons, cavalry, siege engines. Neo-Babylonian period 600 BCE, massive walls, river defenses, advanced engineering. 14. Lessons from Mesopotamian warfare. Geography drives strategy. Flat land favors offense, so defense has to be architectural. Logistics matter. Armies need food, water, and pay more than they need inspiring speeches. Religion motivates troops. Believing your God is on your side helps morale. Empire is expensive. Conquering is easier than holding. 15. The end of the Mesopotamian military era. By the 6th century BCE, even the most advanced Mesopotamian armies couldn't stand against new powers. The Persians brought fresh strategies, bigger armies, and more efficient administration. Mesopotamia became part of larger empires, losing its independent military traditions. The cycle of city-state warfare ended, replaced by centuries of foreign rule. Closing thoughts. Warfare wasn't just about fighting, it was about survival, prestige, and divine destiny. Every wall, every spear, every chariot was part of a 3,000-year-long contest to control the most desirable farmland on earth. And in the end, the lesson was as harsh as the desert sun. In the land between rivers, power was always temporary. Cities rose in glory, then crumbled into dust, leaving behind only broken walls and carved stones to whisper their victories. A day in the life of Mesopotamia. To understand Mesopotamia, you can read laws, study ruins, or translate tablets. But the real heart of it comes alive when you imagine the rhythm of life, the smells of baking bread, the sound of reed boats on the river, the heat of the sun on a mud brick wall, and the voices in the marketplace. So, let's walk through one full day in a thriving Mesopotamian city around 1800 BCE, during the Old Babylonian period. We'll weave in every element we've covered so far, from farming to religion, to trade, to politics, to war. 1. Dawn. The city awakens. The first light slips over the horizon, painting the mud brick walls gold. Roosters crow, dogs bark, the river glints, and the smell of wood smoke drifts through narrow streets. The city gates open to let in farmers from the surrounding fields. Some are bringing vegetables to sell. Others are returning from tending irrigation channels all night to keep the water flowing. From temple courtyards comes the low hum of priests beginning morning prayers to the city's patron god, in this case, Marduk. Inside homes, Wives stoke fires, grind grain, and knead dough for the day's bread. 2. Early morning. The market comes alive by the time the sun is fully up. The marketplace is a roar of activity. You hear merchants shouting prices for figs, onions, and dates. Bronzesmiths hammering metal into tools and weapons. Goats bleating in pens. You smell freshly baked flatbread, fish from the river, incense burning at roadside shrines. Money exists here, but barter is still common. A farmer might trade barley for a new plow blade. A fisherman might pay in dried fish for pottery. Scribes set up at small tables to write contracts for those who can't read or write, which is most of the population. A transaction isn't official until it's on a clay tablet, stamped with cylinder seals. 3. Mid-morning work across the city. Different people head to different labors. Farmers tend fields outside the city walls, checking ditches for leaks, chasing away birds, and making sure the canals carry enough water. Craftsmen, potters, weavers, carpenters work in workshops, often fully run. Traders load goods onto donkeys or reed boats to send upriver or downriver. Temple staff manage the complex's enormous storehouses. Grain, wool, beer, and oil flow in and out under their watch. Government officials meet in administrative buildings to resolve disputes, assign labor for city projects, and prepare tax records. 4. The role of the temple. Midday. By noon, the sun is fierce. Activity slows, but inside the temple district, life is still buzzing. Temples are not just religious centers, they're banks, warehouses, and employers. Priests oversee distribution of grain to workers, lending of silver with interest, maintenance of sacred gardens, and livestock for rituals. Sacrifices take place at midday, perhaps a goat or sheep, with meat divided between the god's altar, the temple staff, and the poor. 5. Early afternoon, education and lowing. One quiet street. Boys and occasionally girls sit cross-legged in a tablet school edaba. The teacher dictates cuneiform signs. Some are learning to write barley and silver for trade records. Others copy proverbs, hymns, or legal formulas. Nearby, in a shaded courtyard, a judge hears a case between two neighbors. One claims the other diverted a canal onto his land. Witnesses speak, scribes take notes, and the decision is carved into clay. 6. Mid-afternoon. Military preparations outside the city walls. A group of soldiers train with spears. They wear leather helmets and carry large shields. Charioteers practice steering on the flat land beyond the gates. The army isn't just for war, it protects trade caravans, enforces laws in rural areas, and intimidates would-be raiders. Occasionally, a royal messenger arrives with news of enemy movements or orders for a campaign. 7. Late afternoon. Social and family life. The heat eases. Families gather water from public wells or the river. Women weave cloth or grind more grain for the evening meal. Men return from the fields or workshops. Children play in dusty lanes with clay balls or carved toys. In wealthier homes, guests are received. Merchants might entertain visiting traders with beer and honey cakes, negotiating deals for next season's goods. 8. Evening. Religion and community. As the sun sets, the ziggurat glows in the fading light. Citizens gather in temple courtyards for evening offerings. Torches flicker, priests chant hymns, and musicians play lyres and drums. In times of crisis, drought, plague, or looming war, the ceremonies are grander, meant to win divine favor. Sometimes the king himself appears, performing rituals to show he serves the gods as well as the people. 9. Night. The city. After dark, most streets grow quiet, but taverns remain lively, serving beer in clay mugs, hosting dice, games, and filling with gossip about politics, trade, and who's marrying whom. The city gates close at night, guarded by watchmen. Strangers arriving late must wait until morning. In private homes, oil lamps flicker, as families talk or work on small crafts. Farmers rise early, so sleep comes soon. But in the palaces, scribes might still be working, recording shipments, drafting letters to other rulers, or calculating tax tallies. 10. Seasonal variations. Not every day is the same. Life changes with the agricultural cycle. Planting season, farmers are busiest. Soldiers may help dig canals. Markets overflow with seeds and tools. Harvest season, temples store grain. Trade peaks, festivals celebrate abundance. Flood season, irrigation systems are repaired. Fishermen do well, but overflows can threaten crops. War campaigns often happen after harvest, when food supplies are plentiful and farmers can be spared. 11. Festivals and special days throughout the year, the city erupts in celebration for religious festivals. The New Year festival Akichu might last 12 days, with processions, plays reenacting myths, sacrifices, and royal rituals. These events blend politics, religion, and social unity, a reminder that in Mesopotamia, life's rhythms are tied to both the seasons and the gods. 12. Underlying structure of the day. When you step back, you see that this daily rhythm is held together by 4 invisible threads. The river's life depends on them. Their moods dictate prosperity or disaster. The temple, the spiritual, economic, and administrative heart. The palace, the seat of political and military power. The marketplace, the pulse of daily survival. Together, they create a cycle that has lasted here for thousands of years, changing rulers, changing gods' names, but keeping the same core pattern. Closing scene. The timeless city, the stars emerge. The ziggurat stands dark and massive against the night sky. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks. The river laps softly against the docks. 1,000 years from now, this city might be ruins. Its walls might crumble. Its gods forgotten. But for tonight, it is alive, a living engine of faith, trade, family, and ambition. And that, more than any king's conquest or epic myth, is the real story of Mesopotamia. People waking, working, loving, fighting, praying, sleeping, endlessly repeating the dance between the rivers.